you need me in?
That's fine. Okay. Today we're meeting to go over some of the descriptors in our TAP rubric, and we're going to go over some of our previous student work from our last cluster meeting, and we were going to identify some low, medium, and high examples of our students' work. So here we have a high example. This was identifying the shapes and being able to give descriptors of the shapes. She scored a perfect score, so we know that that is a high example. So she would be in your high group. You can see she can write her numbers. She does a really good job of drawing her shapes and writing her numbers neatly. And this child, she missed 2 on this. She should have been able to identify both circles in kindergarten. So I've marked her as a medium child because we should really know our circles. And this child, she needs a lot of work. She couldn't identify her shape. She couldn't follow directions. And so we're going to give a lot of scaffolded instruction to her, lots of differentiation. We're going to put her in our Tier 3 RTI group. So do you have any questions about that?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did you agree with those decisions?
Yes, ma'am. I agree.
Thank you. Okay. So we're now going to move into the next part of our agenda, and it's the need. And walkthroughs here at Westwood Elementary have indicated that we need to revisit descriptors 1, 2, and 3 under the standards and objectives indicator. And today we're going to actually look at our rubric. Okay, and it's our very first indicator on the rubric. And do you want to read those first 3?
Yes, ma'am. This is most learning objectives and state content standards are communicated. Sub-objectives are mostly aligned to the lesson's major objective, and learning objectives are connected to what students have previously learned.
Okay. And whenever the administration were doing their walkthroughs, they saw that we as a whole collective campus really need to focus on that in order to drive student achievement here on the campus. So, I'm sorry. I have for you a graphic organizer that we're going to use to, we're really going to focus here on sub-objectives, because our sub-objectives are going to support our main objective for the lesson. And here we would list our objective, and then we would have a sub-objective, or 2 to 3 sub-objectives for each objective. And then we're going to list questions that we could ask to guide our children into learning those sub-objectives. So for instance, if we were looking at our current standard for math here in kindergarten, I can count to 5 and identify numbers 1 to 5. If we broke that down, one of the sub-objectives might just be to identify the number 1 and to be able to count groups of 1. Another one might be to identify the number 2 and count groups of 2. And you could have 5 sub-objectives for that one. Some of the questions that you might ask your children are, what would come in groups of 2? And you can use body parts. We have eyes and ears, we have elbows, and just something that the children are familiar with. Could you think of something that we could ask for groups of 3? What might come in groups of 3? What would be a possible student answer? Fingers. What about a tricycle? Our children are little and they've just recently graduated. Or maybe a big wheel. Or what about our 3 children that we have, Royalty and Robert and Constance. So our 3 children that are siblings here in kindergarten, and our children could really identify, because we want to give them something that they're really familiar with to make the lessons meaningful for them. Okay, so I was wondering if you would be willing to pick a standard, and there's some listed on the board if that would help you that are current standards, so that we could find some sub-objectives together and work on some questions to help us unpack those. So
I can ask and answer questions about a text.
I can ask and answer questions about a text. And so if we were to write that down, use this notepad here. We won't write on your good copy here. And I'll be sending you an electronic version of
Okay.
that too. So, okay. So our objective is ask and answer questions about key details in a text. So what could be one sub-objective? What is one thing that would help them to be able to do that?
What questions do I ask?
What questions do I ask?
Because I know like a lot of our new babies, they're just getting used to listening to stories.
Right.
So just sitting and listening and knowing how to sit and listen and when to ask a question or what kind of questions to ask.
One of the things that I thought about was, do our children know the question words? Like who,
No.
what? So I was thinking a sub-objective might be to teach question words. How to ask a question.
And then kind of what are key details.
Yeah. Teach.
So
What
we're
are,
gonna,
right.
Yeah, so we're going to.
So, one of the things that I thought about on asking questions is we want our children to be able to ask questions and to guide a lot of our instruction within the room. And while they're still only 5, we can still teach our children to ask questions. So whenever you're developing these questions that you can ask, you might want to also think about how you might ask it so that they might grow a question in their own mind and guide them in doing that also, because that's one of the other indicators on our rubric that we're going to look at, and we all want to do well in our evaluations. So what questions do I ask? That would be a sub-objective. What questions are the children going to ask? It does depend on the story. So let's use Pouch, our story from this week. And our children should be familiar
Yeah,
with
they
that.
should be.
Okay. So what could they ask in that?
Kind of like when we started, some of them didn't know what a kangaroo was.
Okay, what is a kangaroo?
Right.
What about Pouch?
Yeah.
They didn't know what
They
a
didn't
pouch
know.
was.
No.
So there's 2 questions there. What is a kangaroo? What is a pouch? Okay. And then teach how to ask a question. Okay. If we think about it, our children ask us questions all day long.
Yeah.
All they do. Miss Brock, can I go to the restroom? Miss Brock, is it lunchtime?
And they don't even realize they're asking a question.
Right. So how could we guide them into asking a question? What could we ask them? What question do you have about this story? That's kind of what I was thinking. What would you like to ask about this story? And also, I thought a mini lesson on who, what, when, where, and why, and maybe even use our fingers to help them to remember and have them identify fingers as we say it and do it several times. So a mini lesson on question words. And then we have, what are key details?
So what is your character's name?
That's an excellent question.
What
The
took
ca-
place in their story?
What took place in the story? One of the things that I felt that they might be familiar with is what happened. Because we ask them on the playground, if they come and tell me something happened, I'll be like, well, what happened? You know, if they got hurt or something. So they're used to that question. So as you can see now, we have a list of hot questions. We don't have any yes or no. We have some that's going to make them think. So then you can plan your lesson plans and kind of guide yourself in developing a lesson that would allow you to ask these questions. So by doing this, by breaking this down, you are actually guiding yourself and developing a plan that will help them to ask questions. So, okay. Okay, so now we're going to take some time and we're going to let you do one with, and I'm going to help you. I'm not going to abandon you because our coworkers weren't here to join us on today.
Okay.
So I'm going to act as
A coworker.
yes,
You're
a
gonna take both
coworker.
roles.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm not going to be helping you as a leader. I'm going to be helping you as a coworker.
Okay. You're gonna use that other one.
And I kind of thought we might go with maybe shapes since we need to review that, and
Yeah.
that's what we used for our student work samples. So to identify and list character,
What's your shape?
yeah,
Characteristics.
characteristics of a shape. That would kind of guide us on our RTI lesson too. Okay, so we need to develop our sub-objectives.
Okay, so first, they need to be able to identify shape.
Okay, so, okay. So I say could put that in the top box. Identify shapes. Okay. I would say that they would need to know like the characteristics of a shape, like curved and sides and vertices, vertex. That's fine.
Okay.
Got it right. Now I don't know if we would have a third one or not, unless you wanted to be able
You
to
could compare.
yeah, compare and contrast shapes.
You know, kind of like if they slide or.
Right. That would give us a that would really help us
That
to
could help
know.
with the rectangle and square too, because they keep getting those confused.
Right.
Some might get the triangle and square confused.
So do some of mine.
Imagine
Okay.
everyone.
So for identifying shapes, so we need to have some questions that we can ask. Are there any shapes that don't have straight sides? Or what can you tell me by looking at this shape? Okay. What do you think about characteristics of shapes?
And then you could do like which shape has two short sides, two long sides.
That would be good because that would help them whenever they do that other sub-objective on comparing and contrasting.
And then that's where I use the Jack. Have you used Jack Hartman on YouTube? There's one where they have to draw him.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They stand up and
Mhm.
draw, and like he says, you know, short,
Short,
long, short, long. When they
Right.
draw it, like that one, that's the only way I can kind of get across to them.
Well, yeah, that's so kinesthetic and it's visual there, and they're hearing it, so they're using a lot of their senses to learn that, even though they aren't really, quote,
Yeah.
feeling it
But
or touching it. Okay. What about comparing and contrasting? How are we going to question that one? Guess we could ask how are they alike and how are they different? Maybe we could do an anchor chart for that.
okay.
Okay, now how do you feel about doing this on your own now?
With some of our standards, okay.
Uh,
No, I
are
think it'd be
the math
okay.
standards going to be your issue?
No, I think really reading, ELA
Reading?
would be some of those.
Okay, well, we all work together as a team, and and Caton's not here today, but she would be happy
Yeah.
to sit down and do this with us for each of our standards. And if not, I don't mind helping out either. And we can always go to our administration, especially Mr. Franklin, since he's our curriculum coordinator, and he would sit down and help us.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have solutions if we get bogged down and need help. Okay, so for this week's assignment, what we're going to do is you're going to take this and you're going to use this to guide you some lessons. And I think that we should probably use this in our RTI lessons, since this is something that we need to work on for some of our children.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to use these questions to guide your instruction. And then next week, whenever we meet back together, bring some student work samples, possibly even the same ones that we have here,
Okay.
and let's see if they did better.
Okay.
Okay, so we are going to be looking at student work samples. And don't forget to put into your lesson plans some of these sub-objectives so that we have proof that you're using them. Because on the TAP rubric, they're looking for all of this good stuff. Are there any questions? Okay, well, I want to thank you for your time, and you have my number if you need me when you're lesson planning.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.